The hotel stood tall and proud, its glass doors shining under the afternoon sun. It was one of the grandest places in the city. Polished marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and velvet curtains that whispered luxury. People came here to stay for special occasions, important meetings, or just to feel a taste of a world far away from their everyday lives. Outside those doors, a young girl paused. She looked plain, clothes worn but clean, hair tied back simply. Her eyes held something steady, a quiet fire that didn't fade even when a sharp voice cut through the air. The security guard, broad-shouldered and stern, blocked her path without a second thought. "You can't come in," he said firmly, glancing her up and down as if she didn't belong there. "This place isn't for people like you." The words hung heavy between them. The girl didn't argue. Her face didn't show anger, only a deep sadness that came from being judged without a chance. Around them, the city moved on, unaware of this small painful moment. But inside, behind the calm eyes, something flickered, a quiet determination not to be turned away so easily. The hotel's doors might close in her face today, but that wasn't the end of the story. The security guard didn't give her a chance to explain. He stood firm, arms crossed, blocking the entrance like a wall. His eyes flicked over her clothes again, worn sneakers, a plain jacket that had seen better days. To him, she was out of place, someone who didn't belong in this polished world of wealth and privilege. "This hotel is for guests and employees only," he said sharply. "And you don't look like either." She lowered her gaze for a moment, but didn't back down. "I have business inside," she said softly. "Please, just let me through." The guard's lips curled into a smirk. "Business? What kind of business? You look like trouble." Those words hit harder than any shove. She clenched her fists but stayed calm. She wasn't the first person to face this kind of doubt, this kind of judgment. It was a kind of wall built from assumptions, about where she came from, what she wore, and what she could or couldn't be. Around them, guests in expensive suits and glittering dresses passed by, never glancing at the scene unfolding at the door. The guard spoke louder now, his tone dripping with disbelief and suspicion. "Look, this isn't a place for people like you. You're wasting your time." Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady when she said, "I'm not here to cause trouble." Still, he shook his head. The hotel's image mattered more than the truth in her words. To him, she was just another face that didn't fit the story he was used to. She took a slow breath, trying to push down the sting of rejection. But beneath the surface her resolve grew stronger. This was not the end, not by far. Not long ago that same girl stood behind a bakery counter, her apron dusted with flour, and her hands aching from rolling dough since sunrise. She worked hard, harder than most people noticed. Between the bakery, cleaning offices at night, and taking care of her younger brother, there wasn't much time left for rest. She never complained. People often looked past her, just like the security guard had. She was used to blending into the background, invisible in a city that only seemed to see glitter and gold. But what no one saw was the quiet climb she'd made. What they didn't know was that her father, before he passed, had worked in that very same hotel. Not just worked there, helped build it from the ground up. He was part of the team that had designed the penthouse suite. When he died, the hotel owner, a close family friend, made a promise his daughter would always have a place there, a key to the world her father helped create. She never used that promise for attention. She never showed it off. It didn't feel right. She wanted to earn her way through life, not be handed things because of someone else's kindness. So the special keycard stayed hidden, only used when absolutely necessary, like today. She had come to meet someone important, for a business deal that could change her life forever. But instead of being welcomed, she was stopped, judged. It wasn't the first time, but it still hurt. And yet, standing there outside the hotel, she didn't feel small, she felt steady. Her father had taught her that real strength doesn't have to shout, it just keeps going. She slipped a hand into her pocket, brushing her fingers against the keycard she hadn't yet shown. Not yet. She was waiting for the right moment, one that would speak louder than any argument. The girl stood still, her hand resting quietly in her jacket pocket. The security guard let out a small laugh, shaking his head as if the situation amused him. "You're wasting your time," he said again, his voice filled with confidence. I don't care what kind of story you're trying to tell, people like you don't just walk into this hotel. She didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, steady and unreadable. I'm asking you one last time, she said, her tone calm, call the front desk, or let me show you something. He didn't move. Look, I'm not calling anyone. You're not getting in. The girl sighed, then slowly pulled her hand from her pocket. In it was a small black key card, smooth, with a gold trim, and a logo barely anyone would recognize. It was not a regular room key, it was something else entirely. The guard blinked. He'd never seen one like it before. He leaned forward slightly, frowning as the golden edge caught the light. What's that? He asked, his voice no longer sharp, just confused. She didn't answer, instead she walked past him without another word. He started to follow, but stopped himself. Something about the way she moved, quiet, sure, made him pause. She approached the elevator, and held the key card against the panel. A soft chime rang out, and a button lit up that didn't light for anyone else. The top floor, the presidential suite. The guard stood frozen, mouth slightly open. She turned her head just a little, enough for him to hear. People like me, she said softly, build this place. And sometimes we come back to take our seat at the top. Then the doors closed, and she disappeared from view. The elevator rose in silence. The girl stood still holding the key card close, her mind calm but alert. Every floor they passed felt like one more layer falling away, all the doubts, all the judgment. When the doors finally opened, it was like stepping into another world. The presidential suite was quiet and golden, filled with soft light. Tall windows looked out over the city skyline. Thick rugs covered the floor. Fresh white flowers sat on a glass table. The room smelled like lavender and success. She took a deep breath and walked in, her shoes making almost no sound on the polished floor. This place, the very top of the hotel, wasn't just a room, it was a symbol. It was where the rich and powerful stayed, and now she was here. Not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as someone with the right to be. Behind her the elevator doors had closed, but the moment still hung in the air. The guard below had watched it all, had seen her rise in silence, without raising her voice or causing a scene. He wouldn't forget it. She walked to the center of the room, and placed her bag on the velvet sofa. In that bag were important papers, proposals, contracts, everything she needed for the meeting that could launch her into a life she had worked so hard to reach. She sat down, but not to rest. She had earned this seat, and now she was ready to use it. Far below, the security guard was still standing near the door, replaying what he'd seen. He didn't know her name, but he knew one thing now, he had been wrong. Completely, utterly wrong, and maybe next time, he would look twice before judging someone by the way they looked. The security guard stayed near the door, his face still wearing the same confused look. A few guests passed him, chatting, laughing, unaware that anything unusual had happened. But for him, the world had shifted just a little. He had seen people come and go from this hotel for years, dressed in expensive suits, shiny shoes, designer bags. They always looked the part, and he had learned to judge quickly. Who belonged, who didn't. Until today, the girl had said almost nothing. She hadn't yelled or cried, she hadn't begged. She had just stood there, calm and quiet, and then shown him something that shattered everything he thought he knew. Now he couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe he'd been too quick. Maybe he had forgotten that people's stories don't always show on their clothes or faces. Maybe she had reminded him of something he'd once believed, that kindness costs nothing, and respect should never be earned by appearance. Upstairs, she was already setting up her laptop and notes. She wasn't thinking about the guard anymore. She had work to do, dreams to chase. But somewhere inside, she knew, this day had meant something more than just a meeting. She had walked through a door that had been slammed in her face, and she hadn't just stepped inside. She had risen all the way to the top floor, without losing her dignity. And maybe, just maybe, the guard below would never look at that door the same way again. Some stories don't need a loud ending. This one didn't end with shouting or applause. It ended with a door opening, Not just in the hotel, but in someone's mind. The girl never gave her name, she didn't have to. What she left behind was bigger than a name. She left behind a moment that challenged judgment, a moment that said, "Look deeper." There are thousands of girls like her, walking down city sidewalks in worn shoes, carrying dreams too big to be seen by the blind eyes of the world, and sometimes, they walk into places that weren't made to welcome them. But that doesn't mean they don't belong. That girl didn't wear luxury on her skin. But she carried power in her heart. Power that came from love, from struggle, from quiet mornings spent working when others were sleeping, from memories of her father's hands, rough from work, warm with pride. She didn't just unlock a door, she unlocked an idea, that someone who looked like her, talked like her, came from where she did, could hold the highest key in the building. So next time someone stands at a door and says, "You don't belong," maybe they'll remember her, maybe they'll think twice. And maybe, just maybe, they'll step aside.